and welcome to the editorial analysis of The Hindu. Today we shall be discussing the editorial of the 19th of July. But before we begin, please take a look at one of the free workshops that we are planning to conduct on the 21st of July. Here we have invited one of our old students, Dr. Shrikant, who had scored an All India rank of 680. He will share several of his experiences, insights. You can ask any of your doubts and questions vis-a-vis this particular exam. So all those of you who are in Bangalore and you can reach us, please try and reach us at this particular address. And for those of you who are our online viewers who cannot reach us, we will try and provide you footage of this particular workshop on our YouTube channel. So please subscribe to our channel. Coming to the discussion now, the first article for today is Inappropriate Template for a Legitimate Target. Now basically the context of this article is that if you read this year's economic survey, in that comparison is what has been drawn to the East Asian economic model. Now, if a comparison has been drawn in a document like the economic survey, this becomes very, very important. Direct question is what you can expect. And even if a direct question doesn't come, this is one example that now has the legitimacy that you can quote it. You can simply say that as drawn from the economic survey, a comparison is what is drawn with the East Asian economic model. So in that particular context, you have to use this article. Very, very relevant, very, very important. Coming to the issues which have been discussed, the first issue that has been discussed here is with regards to some ignored aspects. Now the editorial is first and foremost criticizing the economic survey. It is saying that the economic survey has clearly ignored some of the major challenges that the Indian economy is facing. First amongst them is agrarian crisis. We all know that India is facing an agrarian crisis. Also, it has ignored the troubles of the loss-making public sector undertakings. Several of our PSUs are making losses, primarily the Air India. All of them are what the economic survey for this particular year has ignored. The public sector banks are facing several challenges in India. This again is what the economic survey has not delved into much. So these are the ignored aspects of the economic survey. Next, the editorial is discussing that definitely this is what has been discussed in the economic survey itself, that India has a target of becoming a $5 trillion economy. Now this is one stable statement. There are some statements in UPSC examination that you have to do by heart. You have to use them so many times in your answers now, or wherever there is scope you have to use it. And this is the new staple statement now, that India has a goal of becoming a $5 trillion economy by the year 2024 to 25. So this is the target that India has set for itself, and for achieving this particular target, the economic survey has highlighted that what is required is private investment is required. Now it is in this particular context that the economic survey is discussing that definitely if this private investment is required, this is what can come from a model which is the East Asian economic model, which was followed by the East Asian nations. This includes countries like Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, Taiwan, Japan. So these are the countries that are included in this particular model. You should have an idea of these particular countries: Singapore, Hong Kong, South Korea, all of these countries, Japan, Taiwan. They have followed a very, very successful model and have developed their economies. What did they do? All of that is what we will be discussing. Now first and foremost, in this particular context, you should know that these countries or their economic model was also what was known as newly industrialized economies. They were known as the NIEs. So this is one model that India has been looking into for very, very long. It is not something that this time only the economic survey has looked into it. No, it is something that India is studying for a very long time. But some strategies were what were followed by these countries, and in brief that is what I will be discussing, because that is what has been deeply discussed in this editorial. Here you need to know that all of these countries increased investment in the economy by increasing the savings rate. If the saving rate is what is increased in a country, then it will have money to invest. Now how was the saving rates increased in these countries? Several strategies were what were adopted. First and foremost, there was a positive demographic dividend in these countries. If the demographic dividend was positive, then people were earning, they were depositing their money. Also, there was low inflation, which resulted in an incentive for people to invest their money. There was macroeconomic stability. There was also something that was lack of safety nets. Now, because of these lack of safety nets, for example, even in India, there is a lack of safety net. We don't have health insurance. So people have a tendency to save the money in the bank so that if in their old age they need any health facility, they should have money at that point of time. So it was a scenario that was at that time there in these East Asian countries also, because of which people were incentivized to save their money. Also, at that point of time, in majority of these countries, there was not a very democratic rule. There was some degree of autonomy of the government that was there. Authority of the government was such that they had some forced saving plans also. For example, the PPFs were a kind of a forced saving plans which resulted in increased saving rate, and this is what was later used for investment purposes. Some other aspect of these countries is also what have been discussed. These countries maintained a fiscal discipline which clearly India is not maintaining. Also, in these particular countries, the public sector undertakings were regulated. They have to operate in some budget constraints, which is not in the case of India, where all the PSUs at present are loss making. So that was another benefit that these countries had. Also in these countries, there was a public sector bank network, which was primarily a postal network. And the PSB, the public sector banks, were highly regulated, they were highly centralized, and they were very safe and secure. This again is not the case in India, so that is what has been discussed. Also in these countries, what is important is financial inclusion was what was there. This is what even India is targeting through the Jan Dhan Yojana. But you should know that contrary to India, where only accounts were opened and no deposits were being made and the deposited money was then not being used, contrary to that, not only financial inclusion was done, but rather actual use of money deposited in these accounts was what was done. So that is again something that was important. Also, what was important here was that there was a push that was given to the manufacturing sector, and this manufacturing sector was what was export driven. So that was another cause for the development of their economy. Also, the industrial policy that was followed was a horizontal industrial policy. Now, what do we mean by a horizontal industrial policy is that instead of going vertical, that means helping one sector only, a large amount of sectors were helped. There were labor reforms, that were land reforms that were carried out. Labor and land reforms are one of the biggest demands of the Indian economy. It has often been argued by experts that land and labor reforms are what are required for Indian economy to actually grow. So this is what these countries had actually gone ahead with. They had ensured basic literacy in their population. They have raised women's participation in the labor force. All of these reasons are what had resulted in this model of East Asian economy rising to such heights, and this is what India needs to adopt. This is what India needs to learn from them. That is the analysis that has been made in this particular editorial. Another analysis that has been made here is with regards to the embedded autonomy. This is a keyword, key concept, very important. Even if you don't have direct opportunity, try and use it somewhere, because these countries have been talked about in the economic survey. So if there is one aspect of these countries that you must talk about, this is that concept. Now, what is embedded autonomy? Now, basically what the model of development that these countries adopted was such that the bureaucracy in these countries was what was embedded with the private sector. Now, this ensured that the bureaucracy had autonomy, but it was also involved with the private sector directly. For example, there was a policy that was to be made, some development is to be made. So in that particular context, what happened was that the bureaucracy was directly participating with the private sector, and collectively they were working towards achieving a particular goal. And if in the achievement of this goal, a policy tweaking or policy changing had to be done, then bureaucracy was flexible enough to do it. Also, bureaucracy was autonomous, it was independent, that if it had to regulate the private sector, that also it was doing. It was this model that was most successful for these countries, and it was primarily the embedded autonomy model which countries like Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia did not follow, and as a result of which these were the countries that got stuck in the middle income trap is what has been highlighted in this editorial. So it is this model that even Indian bureaucracy should follow. So this is what you can replicate as an example, and that is why it is very important. Another analysis is with regards to the heterodox policies of reform. Now basically this is the final analysis of this particular article, which is talking that the policies that were adopted by these countries were very different. They were heterodox in nature. They were not on one single track, but rather on different analysis or different aspects of the economy or what were covered under these policies. And that is the idea that India needs to extract. Also, India cannot blindly follow this East Asian economic model. Rather, a model specific to India is what is the need of the hour for India, is what has been analyzed in this particular article. Indeed, I have told you a comparison with East Asian economy is what is age-old, and this is what becomes even more relevant with this concept coming in the economic survey itself. So that is where you have to use this particular article. Indeed, very relevant. Coming to the next article, OIC's curious record on Xinjiang. Now, this is again an important analysis. The context here is with regards to the Organization of Islamic Cooperation. I have discussed so many articles in the past on this. This article in per se is not an important one, but this organization is very, very important primarily for the mains this year. This is because in the 46th session of this particular organization, India had been invited as a guest of honor. This session is what took place in Abu Dhabi. I had discussed at that point of time also what were the pros, what were the cons, what were the shaming that India faced, some embarrassments for what India faced. All of that I have discussed. Now, only in this particular article, only one analysis is which has been given, which I will be delving into soon. So, coming to the issues which have been discussed, first and foremost, you need to know that the Organization of Islamic Cooperation has always in the past been critical of India, primarily in the context of Jammu and Kashmir. Pakistan is a member of the OIC, so they favor Pakistan. They often criticize India for not giving rights to the Muslims in the Jammu and Kashmir area. All of those issues are what often came up in the OIC. But this was a landmark achievement this year, that because of the efforts by Prime Minister of India himself, where he has engaged with several of his West Asian counterparts, that India was invited as the guest of honor, and in the final draft of this particular year, the J&K issue was what was not talked about, was not mentioned. So that is one achievement that did happen. Another thing that you should know is about this organization itself. This is what comprises of 57 member states. Also, you should know that collectively the population is approximately 1.8 billion. This is the world's second largest intergovernmental organization after the United Nations. So indeed this organization is massive. It is what is very, very important, and the aim is that this organization is primarily committed to protect the interests of all the Muslims in the world. The members are all Muslim countries, so that is what you need to know about the OIC. Another important analysis that has been mentioned here is with regards to something called a Nelson's eye. That means a blind eye. Now basically the editorial is highlighting that often this organization is critical of India in the context of Jammu and Kashmir issue, but this organization is what is opportunist because it often ignores the human rights violations that take place in Balochistan province of Pakistan. Now in this particular region, it can be acceptable that they are ignoring because Pakistan is a member country. But in the case of China also they are ignoring, because in the Xinjiang province of China there are several cases of human rights violations which have often been raised, but clearly the OIC ignores, and this is the only analysis in this particular article. Definitely if you have a scope for discussing about OIC, you can mention that there are criticisms against the OIC for being selective in nature, where it does not criticize human rights violation in Balochistan or Xinjiang, but bringing an entire article on this one topic is not something that is relevant for us. So this is the only point that was important. Another issue that you need to know, or another point that is important, is that the Xinjiang province of China is what is referred to as East Turkestan. So this is again something that you should know in the context of Xinjiang. This is something that is not to the liking of China. So that was another point that I considered some degree of relevance for us. So that is the entire analysis of the article, not a very important one, but otherwise OIC is very, very important for this particular year. Please refer to my previous discussions on the OIC. It is important. Coming to the next article, the threat of Ebola. The context here is with regards to Ebola virus. Now basically this is a virus which results in a fatal hemorrhagic fever. This is what has been now referred to as a health emergency. This has been declared as a health emergency by the WHO, and that is why this is what is important. Now this has been declared as a health emergency in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This outbreak was what started in the month of August in the year 2018, and since then this has killed 1700 people in this particular region. Another more than 2500 people are infected, and as a result of this particular reason, this is what is being discussed or declared as a health emergency. So that is what you need to know. Another thing that is important here is the virus transmission cycle. Now this virus transmission cycle is what is continuously spreading. This is primarily because there is a reluctance in the community to control it. There have been attacks on the health workers. There have been delays in the case detention as well as in isolation, and also because of all of these reasons the transmission is what could not be controlled. So that is what is another analysis that has been given in the editorial. Another important aspect that you need to know here is something about a candidate vaccine. Now, candidate vaccine is a vaccine that was not clearly passed, but this was the vaccine that was provided. It was under examination, and this is the vaccination that was provided in this region, and clearly the results of this vaccination or this vaccine have been positive. Those who were vaccinated have had lesser contraction of this particular virus. They have been safer compared to those who were not given this vaccination. So a cure is what is in sight. So that is what you need to know. Another important analysis here is the funding to this particular issue. Now basically this particular outbreak requires funding. Controlling it requires funding. This is what has not come from globally. It was requested of the G7 to contribute towards controlling the Ebola virus, but that is what did not come. So now when this is what has been declared as an international health emergency, it is expected that funding will come for controlling the Ebola virus. So that is what has been analyzed in the article. So these kind of questions, these kind of health emergencies, questions are rare to be asked, but definitely we have to be prepared. We cannot ignore, considering that now this has been declared as an international health emergency. You should be well aware of this particular issue. So that is where the relevance of this particular article is. Now with this we finish our discussion today. These were the only 3 articles. Before we finish, please take a look at one of our programs. We are starting a mains test series from tomorrow, that is the 20th of July. It shall cover 12 tests for the general studies paper. Also it will include 10 essay tests. So all those of you who are interested, please do get in touch with us. These are our contact details. This is a program that will be available both offline as well as online. For our online students, you will have to send us a scanned copy of your test. We will provide you a telephonic feedback for the same. So that is about our program, and that is about our discussion today. I thank you all for watching the video.